Welcome to A Pint with Seaniebee, coming to you from one of the greatest pubs in London. I don't even think my guest would argue with that. She is a London institution.
I would actually.
Okay, well, we're going to argue that in a second. She's a London institution herself. She's an author. She's been on television, and she is... I'm not even sure we're allowed to say landlady anymore, are we?
I don't know. It is sort of old-fashioned, isn't it?
I
never referred to
my... It's not very feminist cool.
No, it's not that even. I just think... I always referred to myself as a licensee, which I am, which means I hold a liquor license, which means I haven't been bankrupt or I haven't run a whorehouse, and a publican. I'm a publican. And when I was introduced to my American in-laws, they said, Roxy, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a publican. They said, a what? A Republican? And my husband said, no. She's
nothing to do with the Irish.
No. No, she's Republican, as
Democrat,
in Democrat, being a Democratic family.
Oh, that's worse.
Of course. And my husband had to jump in straight away and say, no, Mama, she's a saloon keeper.
Barkeep.
Yeah, I'm a saloon keeper.
So her name is Roxy Beaujolais, which is a tremendous name as well. Where'd you get that from?
Oh, I think when I worked for Ronnie Scotts years ago in the 70s, we cobbled that together. I think there was somebody else there called Jenny, which is my birth name, my given name. And so Ronnie called me Roxy. And Beaujolais, I think, was the cheapest wine we used to sell at Ronnie Scotts in those days.
Beaujolais. She has been an institution around London. She's worked in, I probably got some of these wrong, but she's been front of house at Ronnie Scotts, which is a famous institution itself, kind of jazz club kind of thing.
Yeah.
She was in Soho.
Well, I managed a pub in Soho for 10 years, and before that, for a year, I had the misfortune to mismanage in a recession the Soho Brasserie. But anyhow, I soon learnt the difference between restaurant managing and public house managing.
Which is?
Well, I mean, a complaint, usually in a restaurant, the maitre d' usually swallows it and knocks it off the bill and is ever so humble. Whereas with a publican, if people complain and the publican feels within his rights, they can say, show them the door, quite honestly.
Which I'm sure.
And also, because I inherited an unsackable brigade of sullen chefs who didn't know how to chef or cook. So I swore after that, any joint that I ran, I personally would do the cooking. So it was down to me.
Where did you learn to cook?
What happens, just
picked it up.
I suppose. A girl, whose mother was a good old-fashioned cook, a girl who likes to eat and provide for people. Mm-hmm. There was always, when I was single, I was always go around to Roxy's and, got bottles of wine and food,
Perceptive listeners will catch a Aussie accent here. Born in Adelaide, but raised in Sydney. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
What was it like when you were growing up? Were you happy? Did you have a happy time?
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, of course. Family happy, yeah.
Did you have many brothers and sisters?
No, I only had one brother who misbehaved himself very badly in adolescence, and so the old man sent him away to sea. So we don't have much contact because he was older and
were you a bit of a tearaway when you were? You were very good? Good at school?
No, never a tearaway. Just I was no trouble because my brother was trouble to my parents, so I wasn't particularly. No, it was just, happy, growing up. The normal teenage angst, I suppose. Not as much as it is now, of course, with the dreaded, kids comparing themselves and their body features on Facebook,
Instagram,
all that awfulness.
Yeah.
No, I was happy growing up. But as I grew to late teenage years, I mean, my idea of heaven and sophistication was to drink black coffee and watch French films. There was one art cinema in downtown Sydney called the Savoy, next door to the Theosophical Society. And that was my idea. And then I suppose I really just wanted to move. I suppose London beckoned. I had a much older cousin, a painter who'd gone to live in London after the war and came back in the 60s and was a great influence in my life and made London sound so wonderful, from the 50s when they were here, living here. And he used to show at the Redfern Galleries. His name was Louis James. And I really couldn't wait to be 12,000 miles away from the sound of a lawnmower.
But you did paint it, but before we press play, you did paint a nice picture of
yes.
The whole way Sydney was back then.
Well, that's when I left school and went to and my first job, I learned how to type and shorthand and things, and I worked at the Art Gallery in New South Wales, in Sydney, and it was a very happy job with lots of people and painters, and we were friends, and all marvellous. You young and pretty, and downtown Sydney in those days, in the 60s, was really a little Art Deco gem until they started ripping things down and had to be multi-rise with a revolving always with a revolving restaurant on top, to be part of the team.
I heard a great tip once, by the way, Roxy, which is never eat in a restaurant that moves.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that true?
No, I never, but I remember when the first revolving restaurant in Sydney.
It applies to trains, boats, planes, cars, a truck outside. Anything that moves, don't eat.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah, what's the old joke? Don't drink and drive. It might slop over the,
you might
the
steal
steering
some.
wheel. No. If you drink and drive, it'll slop over the steering wheel.
And why do you think you were dying to get out, apart from this guy who was such an influence on you? Did he just sow the seed that life is better outside Australia, or was it just so remote?
He was my famous cousin, who'd left, who'd done, all sorts of extraordinary war service, and then went to London to be a painter with his wife, and it just seemed like a lovely world that I wanted to look at. And of course, all young Australians used to go for a year or two. They do, and because being part of the Commonwealth, they're allowed 2 years working, I think. But I had an Irish grandfather, so I had got patriality on my passport. So I came, and through absolute sheer happenstance, I stayed.
What age were you when you came?
25.
Can you remember how excited you were? Were you
No, I wasn't excited. Of course, I was terrified. And as I said, it was all happenstance. All my girlfriends had been on those big liners, Oriana and things that used to come, boats, and they'd go over and they'd do their 2-year trip and they'd come home. They usually did it when they were about 21. And then I got a free ride on a cargo boat when I was 25, and I stayed. But it was only by accident, really, much to my mother's great sadness that
She thought you'd be back in a year or something.
Yes. And
what was it like when you landed? Did you have it? So you had some contacts here, and then
I knew an Australian family who had some young kids. So for a free bed, I think I stayed there for a couple of months looking after the kids or something, and then it was the YWCA and various other things.
Okay,
You don't know, and really, it's your first jobs that really get you friendly. And then about a year later, then I started working at Ronnie Scotts Jazz Club, and I made friends. I have friends from then now, sort of.
So you're a massive personality and you're very gregarious. Were you like that then, or were you shy?
Yes, I suppose I was loud. I always was noisy. Exuberant is the word. Exuberant, darling.
That's a better word.
And I remember I used to make a quid when I first came here. I'd do temporary typing. There'd be agencies, and you go out and you do temporary. And I had a temporary job. They're all temporary, in some fashion magazine or something, working there for a couple of months, and then it was Christmas Eve. Christmas, and they were going to be. And he came. He told me. He said, "We'll have to let you go, my dear." Because I was too noisy. I was too exuberant for the, and I can see that, fair enough.
A fashion magazine would want someone.
It wasn't. It was an old-fashioned
church magazine.
Magazine. It was anyhow. I won't go into that.
How did the whole Ronnie Scotts thing happen?
Well, just because I liked jazz, and I went there and I said I had a job, and so I had a job, and they gave me a job. I think I worked the bar there for a while, and then
this was the place where all the famous people went.
They did. In the 70s, jazz was neither fashionable nor profitable.
It was on its way out.
And so all those old guys still had to tour. Dizzy Gillespie, Count Basie, Oscar Peterson, everybody. They still had to tour. And they'd drop off particularly in the summer, they'd do a 2-week stint at Ronnie's. Then they go off to the jazz festivals on the continent. They go to the Netherlands and Montreux and places like that. And some nights, close at 3 in the morning, sometimes at 2 in the morning. On stage, some of these guys would be in town, so they might get up to jam. There might be Oscar Peterson playing, Dizzy, Sarah Vaughan singing, and there'd be a few drunks left, or fans, in the room, and just the waitresses lining up listening to this amazing stuff, And then they were old guys then, long gone now.
Did you have any good stories with any of those lads? Or were you still kind of junior or whatever? Because you ended up running the place. Well, you're not running it, but the front of house.
Doing the front of house. Well, I just knew them. You get the measure of them when you come in. The younger ones were always a bit naughty and wanted a girlfriend for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, like I suppose in any music business, I'm sure the classic music businesses, classical music, there were always groupies or people coming by. But I mean, there was marvellous music. But I enjoyed it very much a lot of the time because I would go to work at 8:30 at night, put a flower in my hair like Billie Holiday and do the business, and then the next day I could be up and about London. I had all London as my oyster till
during the daytime,
during the evening. And so those my early years in London. So I became familiarised myself with sort of everything that was going on.
Yeah. It's very intriguing for me listening back to those days because when I was growing up in Dublin, say the 70s and early 80s, it was like kind of, you did also want to get out, it wasn't, it was very unsophisticated, but London was the Dick Whittington paved with gold, like you come over here and things would happen, things that didn't happen in Dublin, still don't to a certain extent, but you just landed here and just you fell in love with it, because I was even talking earlier and you're saying, Australia not so much now with your parents and along.
Well, I don't need, because of the extreme temperatures and I mean I'm in constant contact with girlfriends, but there's no family except my older brother really. And that's sad that when members of the family die that no longer, and also contemporaries, I had a very close girlfriend who died of the dreaded pancreatic cancer at the notable usual age for that disease at 67. And I still mourn her. I could pick up her and say, Bet, I said, what happened to such and such? Or your mother or a relative about, and unless it's written down and photographed, I mean, a lot of the family you're not interested in really, but just sometimes really there's a glimpse of a past time, say, before the war. You think, who was that in that photograph? And then, of course, one's mother would know all that,
Do you get nostalgic?
About Sydney?
About anything? You don't seem to be someone who gets nostalgic.
No, it's been and done. I'm not. No, I'm not. I mean, I understand it. I understand nostalgia. And I used to be, in these times now, though, I don't think we can afford to be nostalgic. I mean, it's very serious. There was a long time ago when I would enjoy. Well, we're all fascinated. People our age are fascinated by the Second World War and the literature that, endless. Still an industry of people's lives in fiction, and also the heroic ones. From that came out of it. We're still fascinated by it, but just in the light of what's happening now, I used the books, the novels, those sagas of much loved. Elizabeth Jane Howard, the Cazalet trilogy. I mean, it is about the English and the upper middle classes, but certain things about the feeling, how women felt in that time, particularly just post-war. Not nostalgic, but I was always very interested in it. But now I realise it's rubbish. You just got to get on with really. Do
you think it's better being a woman now than it was back then? I mean, with the advances that feminism has made, we had an election recently and there was, 4 guys and 3 women running, and the guy asked, "Are you a feminist?" It was a debate, and of course, men find it very hard to say they're a feminist today. I mean, where do you land it?
Well,
do you think,
are men feminists? I mean, do they have to be a feminist?
I would consider myself a feminist.
Yeah, well, all right. I mean, a feminist is a female noun, and if you're a feminist, I mean, of course, I wouldn't be sitting here, darling, talking to you if you didn't think that we, as my sex, didn't deserve or need or necessarily not deserve.
You might know.
Huh?
You mightn't know. You would know.
Listen, I can sniff out a rat bag at 100 paces. I can. No, I can.
But do you think it is better now?
No, it's better for homosexual men now because it was illegal and they could go to prison. So of course that's better now and it's more public. I'm still, coping with this whole new trans scene. Yeah. But and I'm not going to go into that. No. But I mean that women, women, don't go to war and stay home and have babies. I didn't have babies. I went out and worked. I mean, when I was a young, good-looking, pretty young thing out and about, I mean, oi, 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 the attitude was pretty vile. Pretty vile. But it's still pretty vile. So
you were able to handle yourself, were you?
Yeah, but I mean, it's still pretty awful.
No, I'm not excusing it by any means. I'm actually segueing and walking down the road of make America great again and make Britain great again. Was Britain greater back then?
No, of course it wasn't. I mean, the acid started falling out of Great Britain when, the toffs had to start paying tax before the First World War. Yeah. Quite honestly, they created an industrial revolution. The arse is slow. Edmund Wilson wrote about it in the 40s. The arse had fallen out of Britain years ago. It was never great, and America never was great. People can be very romantic about America because it's so loud and brash, and in the 50s they really became something, didn't they, after the war? It was all, people wanted to go, abstract expressionism, marvellous ice-making refrigerators, motor cars with fins. That's all disgusting myth, really. Just, it's jingoistic, isn't it?
It is. Well, we have... In Ireland, I think that we did lose something when we all got rich in the Celtic Tiger, right? But this is now only an analysis of, say, 20 years. When we got greedy... And when we got selfish and we were buying houses in Bulgaria and buying big cars, it didn't suit Irish. It just, it suited some other country. And then we got absolutely spanked. And I feel we're back now closer to what we were, albeit a very well-off country.
I think it's rather interesting. Your Taoiseach is a man
Indian.
Who's gay, and is that his background? Indian.
Yeah, he's an immigrant.
Yeah. Was he an immigrant?
Well,
his family.
His mum and dad came over from India. Yeah, and,
which was early.
It was.
For now, I'm saying. It was always the other way, wasn't it? Yeah, they went to Sydney. They
America.
went to.
I used to say that the reason we're alive, our grandparents, our great-great-grandparents, and before them will be turning in their graves at the idea that when we got rich, we would not take people in who were less well off than us, right? And look after them and be kind to them and be nice to them, which we're back kind of getting on keel with that, but for a brief period, racism, because racism, it wasn't necessarily colour of skin racism. It was kind of.
You're talking about in Dublin,
in Ireland. We had no empire, so we didn't unfortunately, the thing with empire is if you want to take over India, Indians are allowed to come here, and so they should, and and that's the melting pot that especially this city prides itself on. Ireland was more like Eastern European, so it was mainly white people coming in from Poland or whatever. It's still racist, but it wasn't colour of skin racist. But we weren't looking after them as well as we should have, and I think we can't even look after our own homeless now. But
I tell you what I'm allowed to be romantic about. Romantic is different from nostalgic. Nostalgic almost has an urgency that you wish truly it was like that. Whereas romantic, it's just like a brief zephyr of an idea that flows before you. Dublin in the 50s, a favourite book of mine is it's called Dead as Doornails by A.J. Cronin. Okay. You're looking at me as if you don't know.
I haven't read it. I will go and read it. And I am reasonably well read.
It's a marvellous book.
Right.
A Dublin friend of mine gave it to me. It's written by a man called Cronin. There was an English writer called, I think, A.J. Cronin. It wasn't him, but anyway. And it was called Dead as Doornails. And it's about the lives of Patrick Kavanagh, Miles McGopalan, and Brendan Behan.
Yeah.
And it's riotous.
We are recording this on a very famous day.
Oh, is it Bloomsday?
It is Bloomsday,
oh, 16th
of June.
Is it?
And actually this pub, if it was in Dublin, would have been in Bloomsday.
Yes, I suppose it would have been.
I never covered at the start of the podcast the pub, and it's very important because she probably doesn't want lots of people coming, actually.
I don't.
Yeah. It's called the Seven Stars, and it's a kind of... She also hates the word gastropub because she was a gastropub before gastropubs were gastropubs.
It's not. I'm a landlady. I'm calling myself a landlady who likes to cook.
And I just had chicken croquettes, which I will be coming back for. And to paint a picture, it's about we're upstairs in the sort of hidden office, I suppose, but downstairs it's like a railway carriage in size, and it's got beautiful pictures of. It's right in the centre of the law part of London, Lincoln Fields or whatever.
Lincoln's Inn.
One
of the inns,
and beautiful old pub, and apparently on Fridays people spill out into the street here, and she runs it along with a cat who tends to have free reign and can sit wherever is it a he?
He always
he, and he and you'll either have the cat or Roxy or both when you walk in the door, and be nice when she says hello to you, because I was just there and some guy came in with a backpack and kind of looked at her when she said...
Well, I said good day, darling. I said good day to him, but he looked at me blankly.
He did.
He looked at me.
If looks could kill.
Yes.
But Roxy, he probably thought you were a guest. But it's just like...
Do I look like I'm a guest?
No, you don't. But it is. And also the cat thing. Where did the cat thing come from?
The cat?
Yeah. So this pub has always had a house cat that runs.
Well, because I've always had cats,
Yeah.
and since I've been here, my first cat was a marvellous cat called Tom Payne, and he was a right bastard that would run up the street and chase dogs, and
you used to put him in a big rough collar.
they always wear choristers' ruffs from Westminster Abbey. And then there was Ray Brown, named after the jazz bass player, and then there was Peabody. And now I have the wonderful Clement Attlee. So they're all wonderful stray cats that come here to be much loved, wear the ruff and...
So she adopts the cats from cat pounds or places where they've been abandoned by people who don't want them and looks after them. So you're getting the picture, you're listening to her, it's an eclectic kind of place, but it's absolutely wonderful. It's the name of the pub is the Seven Stars, but don't tell everyone. And it's from 1602. There used to be a lot of pubs like this that, I don't know whether, in Ireland as well, where, again, to your Sydney point, no, far better to knock it down and put in glass and metal and whatever. Is there any sign of that coming back? And this must be listed, I'd say.
Oh, no, not here, because this has always been a tavern, although it's been extended a little bit on either side. When we came here 20 years ago, we did some refurbishing, and it's daub and wattle underneath. So it's over 400 years old, and it is listed, and it was always a tavern, so they can't do anything about it.
It must be one of the oldest in London.
Well, it's one of the oldest. I don't trade on that. It's just, people say it must be old, but I think
survived the Great Fire of London.
Yes, a lot of things that are old. Bits of the inn are old,
Do you still love it?
Oh, yes, of course. This is what I do. But pubs they've become, they get taken over by chains or they get pulled down. And I think when pubs disappear from suburban streets and there might be a few people might protest, I think, well, they can't pay their way. My business tax went up 50% last year, which is a lot of money, if you're going to sell pints of beer, a lot of money from, the first day of every month, £3,000 comes out rather than it used to be £2,000.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of money just for that. Suburban pubs can't hack it and they close, and there might be a campaign, but people's lives have changed. Lives for everybody, council flats, whatever. People have plasma screens, they pay Sky to stay home and watch the footer, they get the 6-pack in Texas. There's a marvellous Max Beerbohm story called The Golden Drugget. A drugget is the name of a Turkish rug. And you walk through smoky, foggy streets of London, old London, and in the distance you'll see a light glistening, and it's like a golden drugget of light, and it's a public house where people can go. It's like all those Patrick Hamilton characters in all his books. They can go, and people's houses weren't centrally heated. They were disgusting. That people lived in dreadful. I mean, I remember in the 70s when I came here, what the bed sits were like. With the dreadful ascot that would explode every time you'd light it when you tried to have a bath. Yeah. And that was the 70s. We thought we were modern. Well, we weren't modern. London wasn't modern then, really. And this welcoming warmth of a public house where for a few hours, life, and then they'd have to go home to a different... But that life's changed, and life's not like that now. It's like being sentimental. I'm not sentimental about it. I mean, it's like romantic, telling you the story.
Sure. When I come in here, though, one of the first things I get from it is I start trying to imagine all the great nights that happened in here.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It's something sentimental.
But it's not only here so much.
The laughter and the snow outside and people falling into the street, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. Yeah. Would you ever get a night like that in, like, this year? Or is that all bygone? Like, the actual characters... there's a huge amount of articles on this pub written in all the English papers, and she's a darling of that kind of destination pub. But you had a whole pile of characters used to come here. It's a bit like... It reminds me of Singapore. I used to live in Singapore. And Raffles Hotel and Noel Coward and all those guys. And they kind of dying off. And that's nothing like what it was, because it was on the beach and it was an old ramshackle place.
Do you know that
Raffles Hotel.
Paul Theroux novel called St. Jack?
I haven't read it, but I know it, yeah.
But it was turned into a lovely film with my favourite, not John Cassavetes. it's gone. His name, Paul Gazera, and a lot of it was filmed in Raffles. That was in the 70s.
Yeah.
But of course, Raffles is. Well, people still go there.
Well, they go there and have a 20 euro
Yeah.
Singapore sling and pretend.
Yes.
Well, yeah, but what I mean is the Hemingway pubs in Venice and stuff like that. This is that kind of pub. And you had a lot of famous people
They weren't famous.
Well, I mean,
they were all
let's
rat
call them
bags.
colourful racing identities, which is a great Sydney term.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, well, it is colourful racing identity. But not
Is that
famous
Sydney?
around.
I don't know that expression.
Yeah. Well, you know what it means.
Yes.
It's a rascal.
You mean that?
Rascal.
Oh, right, yeah.
John Singleton, people like that. The ad man down there. Guys
yes,
who
I
go out
remember.
boozing at lunchtime and have a fight with each other in a pub. That's
Yes.
those sort of guys.
Yeah.
But and then when you talk about that golden light, welcoming thing, that's very different as a sort of concept of a pub and this still fits that. I mean, will you still have those sorts of nights here?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
More so if I'm here. I tend, as I'm getting older, I come in and do all the hard physical work in the daytime and tend to go home, or me and the old man go to, the concert hall quite a lot, all that. So it does happen, yeah.
We touched briefly on Brexit. How do you, and I know your views on that, which would be the same as mine, but how do you feel about the future? We talked about the heat and climate in your home country.
Well,
Brexit,
I was
all
talking
this
about
stuff.
it to you earlier about a customer of mine who was thinking, well, fuck that for a game of soldiers. I'm leaving town. Where would he go to? Would he go to the rural, shires, or further west, Wiltshire, where all the artists had second homes in the 60s? When the country wasn't divided, the peasants weren't revolting. It's just when I think the peasants started revolting when all the pea pickers came over from Lithuania and everybody started to hate each other. So where would you go? And then you go to France, and the Penists are going to be taking over. I mean, God knows. I mean, I think you just got to sit tight and sort of argue it out.
Do you think the peasants will eventually revolt?
Sadly, I'm not going to start. Well, I will
You
talk
don't have
about
to,
the
don't
Brexit. If they do, well, they won't really. But if one hopes that there is a second referendum, one would.
No guarantee.
One would. I know, but say if there was,
Yeah.
and more people, only a small people voted. You see, as an Australian, voting is
I
compulsory.
know, yeah. We should be here and in Ireland.
It's not compulsory in America either. You're fined if you don't. So I've always voted. I always tell my staff, everybody can vote. But if there is a second one, it will be the result, no matter what it is, whether it will be more entrenched and bitter, whether our lot, the Remainers, win, or it'll be embittered. It really will. And that's the way the nation is dividing itself.
Any hope for us getting out of the pickle? Boris Johnson's hardly like to lead
Please, no.
us to the promised land. Boris Johnson still hasn't quite been made Prime Minister yet, but it's looking like it's highly likely.
Horrifying.
I mean, I've said this in the pod a couple of times to other guests, but when we were growing up, the British politicians were kind of scary. Like they were tepid and
they were old.
and
They were old.
Thatcher
They were old. Sort of. Well, they were always old Etonians, except Thatcher. But I mean, they were old.
But they're
old
vicious.
tops. Yeah.
We were scared of them. We had kind of failed farmers running Ireland, right? And now our politicians are pretty good. Like, not great, but they're better, and
yes,
we're just looking going, what the hell's going on over there?
But we didn't we think that Mary Robinson was wonderful, that she put the shining light in her window? And look at her with your woman, the daughter of, who'd been maltreated, saying everything.
She walked into I think she stepped on the landmine there. I think she's a pretty good person.
I think so, yes.
At heart, and I think that she's done a lot of good work for the UN. Yeah, we were all like going, no, surely that's not Mary Robinson. It's just people. We don't tell them what to say.
I'm not blaming her. I'm just saying she stepped into it, didn't she?
She did. She didn't do such a
manipulated into it.
Such a great job. So what else? I mean, the other thing I talk about to some guests is that for the first time in my life, I don't really worry about the end of days for me. I don't go, I'm dying to say, I wonder what it's going to be like when we have phones in our hands or whether we can,
Well, I remember when we were in school, we used to say, wouldn't it be funny if a boyfriend rang you on the telephone and he could see you with your hair in rollers? Wouldn't that be funny?
I know. And that would be funny, but it's not funny anymore. I'm kind of going, I don't like the whole climate thing and everything. I'm just kind of like, I'm like, are you pessimistic or optimistic? Like, do you have regrets?
Well, I have regrets that the governments didn't perhaps embrace environmentalism much earlier, and that we had wave power and mirrors in the desert and more turbines, 40 years ago when they were mooted, really.
So we could have done
that
then.
greed or.
Self-sufficiency. What would you say to the younger Jenny from the block in Sydney?
Oh, Jenny from the block. Just keep at it, girl. Keep at it.
Yeah.
Really, yeah. As the retirement looms, within the next 10 years or so, you just got to keep at it.
You're not going to retire.
No, I know. I suppose I'm not really. But the young girl, is really just keep at it. Keep hammering away.
Something good will come. Thank you very much for being on my podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure meeting you. This is the second time. I arrived the first time about 3 months ago, and I thought we'd arranged it and we hadn't, and she looked at me and went, sorry.
I was sorry because I was poorly and I had flu and I was losing my voice.
She was ill, and I was like, I'm definitely coming back.
And then, for the record, and then when you emailed me again for this occasion, I also was poorly because I had dropped a gas cylinder on my toe, and very proudly I had broken my toe in 3 places. The pain brought tears to your eyes. Tears to my eyes, too. But
Is it better?
Yeah, of course.
Keep being who you are.
Keep at it.
Making London happy. Cheers.